103. That's the old one. 103L. Okay. So you do the same thing to find information, but the lab is going to be hands-on. So the bright space course for the lab is just to gather information. Let me find the right one. 071, there it is. Right, and it's the same introduction. And lots of other things, except the assignments, though. These are not going to be extra credits. These are going to be lab reports, places where you can submit your lab reports. Okay, that's what those are for. But you don't have to go here to do it. You can do it from within content. Right? I think you can do it either place. So let's go to content. And I'll tell you what, let me pick up all of this stuff and then give you the lab materials. Let's do that. There won't be as many handouts next time. Because I've already given you chapter 1 and 2. Oh, don't have to do that. Except we're missing Miss Jeffries, Miss Moose, missing 2. Maybe they decided to take it. Okay, let me get this out of the way and put out the handouts for the lab. Right. Now, has anybody ever taken a lab course here before? No? Okay. Some types of lab courses are kind of cookbook. They just give you a method. You go in the lab and you do it, and you fill in the answers, and you hand it in. That's it. This is different. This is a little more rigorous. CHEM103. We do have a couple of that type. The first 2 labs are like that. Just so that we don't shock you from the beginning. But beginning with lab 3, I require a formal report, a written report of what happened in the lab. And it follows a certain format, and everything's here to describe it, and I'll describe it in person too. So, don't grab your marbles and go home. Okay? Stick around. Seems like there are a lot more handouts. As soon as I finish this, you can come up and take one each one. And you've already signed in, so you don't have to sign in again. Okay. So this last one is extra graph paper that you might need for the first lab. It's just take 3 of each. Do that. Okay, so come get a copy of each. And what I'll do is, this is all being recorded together. So what I'll do is when I process the video, I'll split it. And I'll put this section under Chem 103, and I'll put the other one under Chem 101. So you're going to have to go looking for it.
I didn't know that.
No?
Yeah, I didn't know that we had to get them.
Okay. All right. Are you the only one? Everybody else have copies? Okay. Kathy, she shared weapons on your copies. There's Dark Hills chapter 1. putting in a bigger notebook. These are the symbols I want you to memorize.
Okay.
And notice those symbols don't have names in them. You got to look them up. That's part of the fun. Has anybody ever had chemistry before, like in high school? So you've learned a lot of these symbols already.
It was actually a periodic table. It was like in one of our tests, actually. Like we had to memorize the whole thing.
So how did you memorize all those symbols?
Very hard.
I have students that use flashcards. They just get the 3x5 cards, you write the symbol on one side and the name on the other, and you just drill them. Right? Do this one like you have the symbols going through one time, and you guess it. Oh, wrong, it goes in the left-hand pile. Got it right, it goes in the right-hand pile. Just keep doing that until everything's in the right-hand pile. And you go back and do it again. Then flip it over, go the other direction with the name, and do the symbols. And eventually you'll get there. Okay, so everybody's got a copy of that good stuff. Let's see. There won't be any quizzes for the lab. Right? Everything is submitted reports and lab notebooks. I do your lab notebook check also. When we go in the lab, I will check your notebook to see if you're prepared for that lab. Right? You've got it set up in your lab notebook, and there's a specific way to do it. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you get an individual grade for each one of those that I check. You also get the first of the semester check on your notebook, and all you have to do, you have to get a notebook that looks like this. It's quadrilined on the inside. That okay. I got a bunch of them here. If you've got a source that you know of, then by all means go get one, or I'll sell you one. They used to be $1. Now they went up in price. They're $2.25. So I'll sell you at cost if you want to buy one from me. But anyway, the first thing I want you to do with your lab notebook, I might as well just stream of consciousness here. On the cover, and this is not easy to write on this material, so use a Sharpie to write on this stuff. Right? If you write with ink or pencil, it'd probably rub off. But you want your name, you want the name of the course that you're in, and the semester. And that's the bare minimum information on the front cover. Then notice that none of these pages are numbered. Right? So you got to sit down, and I know it's boring. Now sit down and number them. Right? So this first page over here is number 1. Do it in ink. Everything is in ink. Sharpie on the cover and ink everywhere else. Page 1. And then you flip it over. Right? Up here, page 2. So all the right-hand facing pages are odd numbers. All the left-hand facing pages are even numbers. Okay. And I'm not sure how many pages are in here. Is in the neighborhood of 200. But if you're moving along and you start numbering even numbers on the right-hand side, you know you skipped one somewhere. You need to go back. So how do you make a correction in a lab notebook? You don't erase. Don't use whiteout. Draw a line through it and initial it, and then put the correction in. Any type of correction you make, you initial, and it stays there for posterity. Now, the reason for that? Well, one reason is whether you work for the government. I worked for the federal government for 22 years, and we had lab notebooks. Those lab notebooks belong to your employer because they're a record of what you did for the employer. And for in the private industry, particularly, they want a record of the research that was done, for instance, so that goes into the lawyers need that for getting a patent, for instance. A proof that the work was done. And then if somebody else comes along in your position after you retire or you move on to another position,
they can pick up where you left off. So that means when you put anything in the lab notebook, you want to write it legibly, and you want it to be thorough enough so that any experiment that you conducted in here, either you or somebody else 6 months later can come in here and duplicate that work. Okay, that's what in the back of your mind when you're filling out the lab notebook. Be sure you've got enough information in here so that you can repeat the experiment. Right, you won't have access to that hard copy, right? The handout method. You have to work from this. Okay, so that's the first thing I want. Information on the first page, number all the pages, and then right here, table of contents. So anything that you put in here under table of contents, you write the name of the experiment and the page it starts on. That's all you need. Why? Because the next time you put something in there, it's going to be on the page that starts after this work. So you only need the starting page. You can put all pages if you want, like page 1 through 5 or whatever, but you only need first the page that it starts on. Okay, so whenever you put something in here, right, start on the right hand, leave the left hand alone. Do not write on the left-hand side. Write on the right-hand side. Title of your experiment, and then the information that you need to put in under that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Why do we leave this one blank? For overflow. Right? If you make a huge boo-boo over here, you don't want to have to go to another page over here. You can just cross it out, initial it, and make the corrections over here. Or say you've got all this data here and you need to draw a graph. That's why we're quadrilined. You can draw a graph on this side of the page. Okay. And it's a good idea when you first write the procedure in here, the experiment in here to be done in the lab, that you write every other line. So minor corrections, you'll have a place to put them, right? If you write one line on top of another, where are you going to put your corrections? Right? You have to put them over here. So give yourself a lot of space, right? There's plenty of room, right? Only 7 experiments, and look at all that paper. Right? So you got lots of room, just skip spaces when you write them. Okay, so stream of consciousness. Here's a sample notebook, some pages from a notebook. Like there's the cover. I blanked out the student's name. No personally identifiable information. And then here's the table of contents. Right, there's the page number up there. Right. And here's one of the experiments: molar mass by freezing point depression. And minimum information that you need when you first set up for the experiment. Each experiment, you need a title, of course. That's what this copy is for. You need an introduction, right? Why are you doing it? What's the objective? Every experiment has an objective. Keep it simple, stupid, right? So that introduction. And then you want safety concerns, right? So you need a section on a safety blurb, right? What do you need to watch out for? Like hot objects, I mean, are you going to be using open flame? Are you going to be using reactive chemicals that could spatter in your face? You know, what do you do about it? Those are safety concerns. Then the materials required. What do you need to gather together to conduct the experiment? Materials, that includes chemicals and equipment. And breakables, like beakers and flasks and things like that. Then the procedures, step by step. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you don't have to write it verbatim what's in this method. Write it the way you understand it. You can write it verbatim if you want. That doesn't matter to me. And then there might be some pre-lab questions that need to be completed before you go in there and answer questions and answers. And then after the experiment, sometimes there are post-lab questions. All you need for that is a section set aside. Just write post-lab questions and then leave blanks for those. You need reserve space for the data and observations. Now that will vary depending on the experiment. Maybe you're going to have just a few numbers that are gathered. So you can write, what is this number, right? What name it, right? What does it represent? And then a blank, right? And that's where you put the answer. Or it could be lots of numbers. Like you could have a timed experiment. So like every 10 seconds, you're going to take a value, right? So you may want to make a big table and make a place for all those numbers. That's for your data and observations. And then leave a section open for calculations, right? This is at the beginning, right? So you're not going to have all that information yet, but you need to put that's what I'm looking for when I check your notebook before each lab exercise. Reserve the space for calculations. Just write a header calculations and leave space for it. Then results and discussion, conclusions, whatever you want to call it. Summary and conclusions. Leave a space for that, right? You won't do that until after the experiment anyway, but you need a space reserved for it. So that's a summary of what you want to put in. There's a more involved lab report format. The lab report format parallels this in your notebook. So once you've completed the experiment, put everything in your lab notebook, the report should be easy because you've got everything right there in front of you that you're going to need to write the report. It's right in your lab notebook. You just need to transfer it over to a formal report format and use the correct grammar. That's particularly important for procedures. When you put the procedures in your lab notebook, it says, do this, do this, do this, do this, measure this, whatever, whatever. Right? When you write your report, you want to put it in the passive, my mind's gone blank. We'll put it in the third person. Third person passive past tense. In other words, you say something like, approximately 50 milliliters of water was measured from a graduated cylinder. Rather than saying, do this, measure 50 milliliters of water. That's what it would be in your notebook. But in your report, you would say, this is what actually was done, because things might change. The method might change slightly. And your report is supposed to say what actually happened. Okay? Not what you wish happened, but what did happen. And it'll be readily obvious to me when I read your report if you just went in and regurgitated the method. Right? That too often students lose lots of points for doing that. Now, how do I grade them? Okay. Your report, I grade using this rubric. But that tells you what I'm looking for. Right? You want me to circle all these on the left. If all these on the left are circled, then you get more than 100%. Grading down goes to the right. So, for instance, if your method is third person passive past tense to describe what was done, then you get 12 points. If you don't use that, then you might only get 6 points. If the grammar and wording indicate that you actually regurgitated the printed procedure, you get 0 points. Okay. All right. So that may be a little cryptic. So what I did was I got a reasonably good report. Here's this one from a student that I thought did a reasonably good job, but it just wasn't perfect. But this shows you how the report looks. when we write it up. And it shows my corrections. So that'll give you something to give you an example. All right. The other things that are in the handouts, this one you may wonder what this is. Got pretty colors on it. In the sciences, we use lots of symbols. Now, when you're there's a name for it. Well, this little icon. Here it is. You see that? No, you can't see it there. It's a character map. It looks like a little pyramid with the top chopped off of it. You click on that, and you can find any font, any character that's available in that font, and you can copy it and paste it into your document. Well, that takes 4 or 5, sometimes keystrokes to get there. However, this, if you hold down the Alt key and type out the number next to the character on your number keypad on your computer, it comes up with that symbol. So you can do it in just one combination keystroke. The ones on the left are Windows characters. The ones in the middle are legacy DOS characters. Sometimes they work better. The one on the right in green, I'm not swearing to any of these. They're supposed to work, but I don't own an Apple product. These Mac characters. If you work with a Mac, you may want to try them out first and see if they work. Because it's one thing I've learned is Apple products don't play well with others. So if you have any trouble with your Apple computer, I refer you to what is that guy's name? CEO of Apple. I forget. Anyway, Apple's not my bailiwick. Okay, so there are things about laboratory notebook format. All these things have been given out here, and they're duplicated in here. There's a nice document I handed out there, common errors in preparing a formal lab report. So you may want to look at that, and it tells you what to watch out for. Places where you can lose points, needlessly lose points when you're writing your report. There's a sample report. Oh, plagiarism. Everybody know what plagiarism is? It's submitting some work that somebody else did, claiming it for yourself. Sometimes it's hard to tell what plagiarism is in writing a lab report. So I put together this blurb. It's front and back of one page. I also inserted a thing about artificial intelligence. So I'm not going to waste your time. You go ahead and read that. And if anything doesn't make sense to you, we'll talk about it. Actually, the best way to avoid plagiarism is do your own work. Okay? Your lab partners, you and your lab partners are going to come up with similar information because you're working on the same experiment. So the numbers, the raw numbers that you get from measurements are likely to be similar or even exactly the same. But if you have to do calculations, you need to do those yourself. And if there are any observations and conclusions that need to be drawn, those need to come out of your head too. If you do that, then it's unlikely that you'll ever be called on plagiarism. Okay, so that's about it. I can't think of anything else. There is an introduction video in here you can watch. Lab exercise modules, here we go. Okay, so these first 2 labs, one of them I've handed out, introducing graphing techniques. Let's see. When is that one due? Be in the syllabus, just like before. Try to keep things uniform. Here we go. The first lab notebook check I'm going to make next Tuesday. So where you label the front, put in the table of contents and number every page, that's all you have to do, and I'll check it for that. This first exercise, I handed it out today, but we're not going to actually dig into it until next week. And then we'll take the lab time for next week, and I'll talk about this in more detail. You can read it between now and then. And if you've done graphing before, I mean, you're welcome to try, right? But I'll give you a detailed overview of that next week, next Tuesday, not Thursday, Tuesday, during the lab time. Okay, and that one is an informal report. There are things that have to be filled out in here. Some of them are required, right, starting here, and some of them are bonus. Right? And the bonus section is clearly marked, like when you get to the bonus section. There it is. Right there, it starts there. So you can do that if you want to. You don't have to. And then you got graph paper plus the extras that you might have picked up in case you mess up a graph. But you just turn this in just as is. Build it out. Don't forget to write your name on it. The first one will be an informal report. I'm trying to give you some breathing room before you have to turn in your first formal report. Right? If you've never written a formal report, it can be intimidating. Right? It's kind of like going for your first graduate degree. You write a master's thesis, you know, like that. And then you get a little more comfortable with it. So when you get to a PhD, not quite as daunting. But still, I remember when I went for my PhD defense, the best advice I got was, listen, all those committee members sitting out there, you know that material better than they do. And that was true, because I've been working on it for 5 years. So yeah, okay. And it wasn't so bad. And then they always throw one question at you. You ever heard that? Sometimes it's the first question. Right? Why are manhole covers round? Right? Why are they round? So it doesn't matter what direction you put them in the hole, they won't fall through. Right? If they were square, you could turn it a certain way and there goes your cast iron manhole cover in the bottom. But if they're round, they can't go through the hole. All right, that's aside. All right, so there are all the the first one and the second one, laboratory techniques. Laboratory techniques, you can put that in your lab notebook if you want practice, but the report is going to be informal. You'll just fill out the document. We're actually going to go in the lab and do stuff. The graphing techniques, most of that will just be taught during that time, and if we have any remaining time during the lab next Tuesday, then you can start working on it there. But you can do a lot of that stuff at home if you want. Okay. And then starting with lab number 3, waters of constitution and hydration, that's the first formal report is due for that one. Okay. All right.